Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's Dr. Bruce Manciagli.
But without the doctor. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I keep wanting to
But
give him a title. Social Entrepreneur in Residence is his title for Florida State at the College of Social Science and Public Policy. So, thanks for being here.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for you guys taking one of your evenings. You guys all right? All right. This is going to be there's going to be engagement tonight. So hopefully you guys have some energy left in you. Right? Before we jump in, I wanted to get a quick idea of who's in the room. And so, what are you majoring in? And it would be helpful to know if you have a team that's entering the Innovation Challenge, and if there are any of your partners in the room. Okay? Yeah.
Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Christina Lavender. I actually graduated from FSU in May of 2017. I am in grad school here studying public health. I do have a partner. She came to the last workshop, but she's in grad school as well. I'm in business school here at Florida State. So we swap out when we can.
Okay, a team of two then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Hello everybody, my name is Joseph. This is actually the first workshop that I'm attending. I actually recently figured out about the innovation, so I'm just trying to receive as much information as possible. As of right now, I don't have a team, and I did not intend on participating this year. I'm just more so
okay.
to follow.
Okay, nice. What is your major?
Finance.
Finance, okay.
Hi, my name is Jet Wanda Robinson. I'm majoring in commercial entrepreneurship, and currently I do not have a team.
Okay.
My name is William. I'm a mechanical engineering major. I currently have a team of 3 other engineers.
How many?
3.
3? Okay.
Is it a senior design project? Or
Is it different departments?
No, we're all at MEs.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'm Manolo. I'm a marketing major. He's my partner, and our other partner couldn't make it today.
Okay. I'm sorry, what major was it?
Marketing.
Marketing, right, okay. Oh, you're all marketing, or?
No, I'm an exploratory.
Okay. All right, yeah.
My name is Ethan Taylor. I'm in electrical engineering, and I have a senior design team. He's so on my team.
All right.
I'm David Ocasio. I'm an electrical engineering major. We have a team of 4 people, and the other 2 people.
Okay, thanks.
My name is Leah Hopkins. I'm studying industrial manufacturing engineering, and I'm here representing the senior design team.
Okay.
I'm Tom Doe. My major is information communication technology and environmental sciences. I have 3 other members of my team. They're not present today.
Nice. All right. You said 2 majors?
Yeah.
Yeah, double major. Nice. All right.
I'm Lana. I'm also doing commercial entrepreneurship, and I don't have a team of
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jenna Caldereo. I'm a commercial entrepreneurship major, and I'm interested in product development and marketing.
And what?
Product development.
Okay, yep.
I'm Nick Chase. I'm in the commercial entrepreneurship program, and I do not have a team as well. Just here feeling it out. So.
Okay, yeah. And Wendy, do you have a sense of how many might be entering the competition? Or?
Not really. We just had the information sessions last week, and we had full rooms.
Oh, nice. And there's still plenty of time to submit.
So there's still, the deadline's not till November 2nd.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So we hope people that are here without teams will form up and join teams.
Yep.
So there's still a lot of time to develop that.
Okay. How many of you are familiar with design thinking or human-centered design? A little bit, somewhat, or maybe a lot. Yeah, and of course, so much of what we talk about here, you might use in some of the technical fields like engineering, architecture, interior design, things like that. So, the angle that I take on this work is focused on social innovation, but it's the same set of principles, and so we'll look at that a little bit. So I'm going to set the stage for what design thinking or human-centered design represents, I'm going to call it a process, even though technically it's not a process. But for lack of a better word, we're just going to use that for now. And I think it's really important before you get into the hands-on piece that we understand the framework and why this particular approach to problem solving is so effective, especially when we're dealing with certain variables and conditions. And then I'm going to ask you to come up with, to frame maybe some of the ideas you have or the issues you're focusing on as a design challenge, and we'll talk about that a little bit, we'll debrief, and then we'll practice turning our framing and our ideation into quick prototyping. We'll just get a feel for that part of design thinking. Okay, even though there'll be another session strictly on prototyping. Excuse me. Just to set the stage, and this is so important, I think, for anyone living in the world today. Not just even if you're in a technical field, these kinds of attributes are going to be critical. So, how many of you might be feeling anxious, maybe, about the future, given the potential disruption of artificial intelligence? Anybody? Yeah, I mean the predictions on that, the forecasts are pretty sobering in terms of how disruptive it's going to be. Taking over accounting jobs to design work and all sorts of things. And the Moonshot group, which Ken is a part of, has a great event coming up on leveraging artificial intelligence to enhance creativity. So there are different. That's another angle on looking at this. But there's no question. I don't think anyone's going to argue that AI is going to be a disruptive force. Whether it's positive or negative, usually it's both, right? Some of the themes that came out when they asked people with expertise on this future that might be, or expertise in the present to anticipate what the future might look like, talked about teaching tough to teach intangible skills, capabilities, and attributes like emotional intelligence, curiosity, creativity, adaptability, resilience, and critical thinking. And that's one of the beautiful things about the Innovation Challenge, and I think what we're all doing collectively, people like Wendy and Ken and people across campus, Mike Devine in engineering, is building an ecosystem here at FSU that cultivates these kinds of attributes and skills and traits. And again, it doesn't matter what field you're coming from, this is all going to be critical. These are the kinds of things that artificial intelligence will not be able to emulate as easily as some of the rote activities. This is just a diagram of these very kind of attributes we're trying to cultivate in the social innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem, and the kinds of pedagogical approaches we're taking. So things like the Venture Weekend, things like the Innovation Challenge, take advantage of them because they will absolutely help you develop this side of your skill set and mindset. Let's look here. Let's look at this one here. Would someone mind reading this one by Tiffany Schlain?
Tiffany Schlain, filmmaker and founder of the Webby Awards, wrote, "The skills needed to succeed in today's world and the future are curiosity, creativity, taking initiative, multidisciplinary thinking, and empathy. These skills, interestingly, are the skills specific to human beings that machines and robots cannot do, and you can be taught to strengthen these skills through education. I look forward to seeing innovative live and online programs that can teach these at scale."
Yeah, and hey, so sometimes, I'll ask, do people think you can cultivate creativity, or how many people think they're creative? Yeah, there's no question that just like learning a language or learning soccer, this is something that you can strengthen through practice and more awareness about how to set up the conditions for good creativity. And would someone mind meeting Ben Schneiderman? Anybody? Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
Professor of computer science at the University of Maryland observed students can be trained to be more innovative, creative, and action initiators of novel ideas. Skills of writing, speaking, and making videos are important, but fundamental skills of critical thinking, community building, teamwork, deliberation and dialogue, and conflict resolution will be powerful. A mindset of persistence and the necessary passion to succeed are also critical.
Yeah, and again, it's not just about creativity for its own sake, even though that's great. You know, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But it's creativity in service to solving a problem, whether it's the kind of problems we deal with in social innovation and entrepreneurship, what we call unjust equilibriums, or the kind of problems that are addressed in commercial entrepreneurship. They're all important, and this methodology, this approach helps us to turn creativity into innovation that's in service to a problem. So design thinking, would you mind sharing just your name and are you part of a team? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
My name is Gabe Breakstone, and I started up my own company, Gabe Jordan Custom Careers, which sell custom dress clothing, suits, dress shirts, that sort of thing, to young adults and college students and business professionals.
Are you entering the challenge?
Yes.
Okay. You have a team?
Just me.
Just you for now? Okay. All right. So design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation. It emphasizes the need and how an individual or set of individuals are experiencing the problem, not your brilliant idea. Right? Your idea is not that important unless it's actually moving the needle on a problem that's being addressed. So it's not about your idea. It doesn't start with your idea, and it doesn't even end with your idea. So here are some of the mindsets of a human-centered designer. Learning from failure, of course, it's reframing what we mean by failure, right? Don't think of it as failure. It's setting up a series of experiments where we're learning. We're just gathering data on what works, what doesn't work. And so it's a very useful way of looking at it. And research shows that one of the key stumbling blocks for innovation and creativity in the first place is this fear of taking that first step, or fear of failure. And if we reframe it, it's very useful. So it really emphasizes this idea of moving out of your head into prototyping and testing your idea as quickly as possible so that you can keep iterating and moving the idea towards something that's going to really work effectively. Creative confidence, that everyone has the ability to be creative. Empathy. Empathy, of course, is both understanding what it's like to experience something in someone else's shoes, but in this process it goes even beyond that to understanding the problem as broadly and deeply as possible. So in empathy we might engage, well, how might we engage empathy? Anyone? How might we learn more about a problem that we're focusing on?
Personal experience.
Okay, so yeah, our own personal experience. What else? Yeah.
Trying to view a scenario by a different perspective.
And how might we do that?
By trying to identify any potential biases we might have. And try to
Okay, so self-awareness. But how? Yeah, that's good. How might we even help ourselves become aware of some of our biases? Yeah.
By actually listening to other people and
Yeah.
being engaged with other people's lives.
Okay, so engagement, immersion in people's lives who are experiencing the problem, and obviously in respectful, appropriate ways, right? But what else? Listening to people. What's sort of a formal way of listening to people? What do we call that? When we set up a set of formal questions and then we listen to the answers. Yeah, interviews. So we can conduct primary research. And also, well, what's another form of primary research that we might do? Sometimes people, either they're not fully aware of what they do in practice, or they might tell you something that they think you want to hear, or for whatever reason, there's not an alignment between what they say and what they do. What's another way of getting more data? Observation. Yep. Yeah. And then how about if we want to look at more broadly, you know, what the field says about an issue, as opposed to primary research. Hmm?
Surveys?
Well, that's part of primary research. Yeah, we can collect quantitative data. Yeah, absolutely. So you can use both quantitative and qualitative data to conduct the primary research. Absolutely. Yeah. And how about though, as opposed to primary research?
Secondary research.
Yeah, secondary research. What does the field say about? Our grad student here is knocking it out of the park here. Yeah, what does the literature say about this issue? Right? So we want to look at all of that. These are all ways we can start to understand a problem more broadly. And so, again, it is understanding what people are experiencing, but it's also understanding the problem as broadly and as deeply. And I guarantee you, the more you do this, the better the ideas and solutions you're going to come up with. Embrace ambiguity. You have to be willing to do that. Give ourselves permission to fail, to explore, to be wrong. Right? It's more about curiosity than being brilliant. Right? And oftentimes I like to say it's about falling in love with a problem. When you fall in love with a problem, it's not about your idea. It's about how can we effectively address the problem, and that's what drives you, right? So be optimistic. This is so critical. Looking for opportunity within challenges, especially with complex problems, and persevering. And then iterate. So again, it's always evolving, tweaking, getting feedback, testing, and going back until we find something that works, right? All right. There are different names for this basic methodology or approach or process. And in the social innovation world, you have the social impact framework and human-centered design in particular. More broadly, we have design thinking, creative problem solving. Does anyone notice a pattern? Even though the terminology is different, does anyone notice a pattern in how we, even though again also it's not a linear process, there is a commonality among all of these. Does anyone see that? Where do we come up with ideas in each of these cases? Yeah, absolutely. So it always starts with collecting information, understanding the problem. Yeah, and whether you call it hearing or investigating or being inspired, where is ideation then? I told you guys it's going to be interactive.
So ideation, the next step.
Yeah, it's always in the middle, right? It's always in the middle. But so many times we get that backwards. How many of you already have an idea in your mind coming into this challenge? Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, except that you please keep an open mind as to how that idea might evolve, right? And it could be an idea that you've already been working on for some time, so you may already have a pretty deep understanding of the problem. But still, you have to keep an open mind as to how it's going to evolve. And if you don't have an idea coming in, don't worry about it. Just engage the process. It's actually a beautiful thing because you're going to come in with more of a beginner's mind and really be curious about the problem, right? All right, and then it moves to implementation. Once you're going to prototype, test, iterate, and then move to implementation. Would someone mind reading this quote here? Yeah.
Designers don't try to search for a solution until they have determined the real problem. And even then, instead of solving that problem, they stop to consider a wide range of potential solutions.
Okay, and keep going, yeah.
Only then will they finally converge upon their proposal. This is called design thinking.
Okay, yeah. And so it's a process that involves divergence and convergence. And again, it's not linear. It often loops back. But we always diverge you know, allow this expansive approach to ideation or understanding the problem or whatever it is, and then we converge on you know, once we have an understanding of the problem, we converge on framing the problem. Or once we have multiple ideas out there, we converge on what's feasible, what's practical, what's you know, cost effective, things like that, right? By the way, all these slides will be up on the site. Now this is something. This is an example of a social innovation that emerged out of the human-centered design process, and it's called the treadle pump. It's again, what do you notice about this? You know, it's a foot-powered pump. What do you notice about this innovation? Anything come to mind?
Definitely a DIY.
Yeah. It's fairly simple, right? What about how it's built or the resources it uses? Yeah.
Uses very minimal resources.
Yeah. Minimal resources that are probably available locally. It's probably easy to fix if it breaks, right? And in terms of impact, this has transformed the ability of many rural farmers to produce, instead of one crop a year, probably a subsistence crop to feed their family, to create or to grow maybe 2 or 3 crops a year, some of which then could become cash crops that they could sell on the market to increase income, right? So a really effective social innovation that emanates from a deep understanding of the context and the problem itself. Okay, and again, we're going to look at this, but you have to look at not just the problem, but then the constraints, the resources, and the opportunities and the needs within that ecosystem. And here's an even more basic version using bamboo, right? So, of course, it does have a metal component here, but this is a social innovation that came out of a course at Stanford called Design for Extreme Affordability. And a course I teach here sort of emulates that course. It was inspired by this course called Human-Centered Design for Social Innovation. The Stanford students actually they go overseas as part of the semester to do this work, whereas here in my course we partner with a local organization and apply these ideas in service to them. And so like tomorrow night we have a stakeholder meeting of about 25, 30 people that's going to give us direction in terms of our design challenge. We don't start the semester knowing what that is. It has to emerge from the stakeholders. So, but this group of students developed the Embrace, and this has kept thousands of premature babies alive. What do you think? What are some of the constraints that this addresses in a very elegant manner? We're talking about low-income, rural, under-resourced communities. In this case, it was in rural India. What are some of the what's a common way in the U.S., for example, to approach premature babies? What do we use? Yeah.
We normally put them in neonatal, so we put them in a warmer.
Yeah, and then keep a warmer, and it requires, they're expensive. They might be complicated to fix if they break. They require constant electricity, right? Whereas this one, you plug in for a certain amount of time, and then it can work for a number of hours. Very, much more inexpensive, easy to use, right? Even though it looks like a glorified blanket, it's quite high tech. The material that they use and the way it's designed. And one thing I want to point out, though, that when we talk about social innovation, I like to talk about the initial point of intervention. What might be some underlying reasons for why we have too many premature babies in, let's say, this community, and why too many of them are dying? What might be some underlying causes of that? Yeah, just throw ideas out there.
They can't afford the machines.
Okay, so yeah, cost, access to technology, low income. What else? Yeah.
Energy might not be sustainable to keep the electricity flowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So access to constant electricity. What else?
A lot.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
Maybe it's just not accessible in the market, maybe it's hard for people to obtain the product. Not like the retailers, for example, like Kickstarter, for example. Accessibility of the product, essentially.
Yeah. And how about?
I was just gonna say like a lot of different environmental factors, social factors. So their ability to access healthcare, not being able to afford prenatal vitamins.
Yeah. So it could be an access issue. It could be awareness issue. Health education. It could be poverty. A number of underlying conditions. Does this innovation address those underlying conditions? No, it doesn't. But is it a worthwhile innovation? Yeah, so it's what I call the point of intervention. Now, once you get this in place, it's saving lives. But then you deal with the underlying conditions, right? You might build an organization that can disseminate these products. It could be, you're generating revenue from it. But obviously, if you're working with beneficiaries at the bottom of the economic pyramid or last mile communities, it has to be extremely affordable. But but it could be a hybrid organization that sells them in more than one market, where it's somewhat subsidized on the last mile market. But also, the organization might start to build wraparound support services like health education, access to health care, better trained medical professionals, things like that, right? So I encourage you, as you're building your models, not to just come up with some sexy idea that looks really cool, but to think about how you're systemically addressing the problem, whether it's social innovation or commercial innovation, right? All right, and again, whether we're talking about social innovation and entrepreneurship or just the field of innovation and entrepreneurship more broadly, the same principle. It doesn't start with an idea that you're going to just run with. It starts with understanding the problem. That's the innovation piece. And so understanding the problem, ideating an effective solution, and then implementing it through an enterprise or an organizational framework. And so see it as one field, all right? It's not just one or the other. Now, moving into design thinking, again, we've talked about this idea that there's divergence and convergence as we go through this process. And we've talked about these stages, the inspiration phase, the ideation phase, and the implementation phase. This is sort of the classic diagram for design thinking. Again, it starts with empathy, and the reason it's divergent here is because we want to understand as much of the problem as possible. And then we converge from that into framing the problem, and we're going to talk more about framing the problem effectively. From there, we ideate in a divergent manner, and then we converge towards one or a combination of ideas that we think has value to pursue, and it's based on certain criteria that we're going to talk about. And then we prototype it and test it, and then this loops back to, it could be that during this process, we learn more to the point where we want to reframe the design challenge. Maybe we want to narrow it or broaden it or pivot a little bit. And then, again, this, after we test and get feedback, we go back to ideation and prototyping and iteration, basically. All right, and so this process is extremely effective for dealing with the ambiguity and messiness of complicated problems. So they're called adaptive problems rather than technical problems, right? With technical problems, they're usually known or pretty straightforward or linear approaches. We've seen it addressed in one setting and it's replicable. Whereas adaptive problems or wicked problems are much more complicated and they don't lend themselves to easy solutions. And so these are some of the attributes, let's say, of wicked problems. The problem is unique. There's no clear problem definition necessarily. These kind of problems may not even be solved in our lifetime. Can we think of an example of a wicked problem like this? Hmm? Aging, okay, yeah, that's going to be around, that's part of life, right? Hopefully it's part of life. Yeah, what else?
Good and bad, just naturally good people, bad people.
Okay, so you might extend that to conflict or war or violence. Yeah, okay, what else? Poverty, climate change, right? These are wicked problems. Okay, let's get into some of the thinking around why this is such an effective framework, and then we'll make it a little bit more interactive. Okay, we'll just go quickly through some of this stuff. What is design? Is the purpose, planning, or intention that exists behind an action, fact, or material object. And unfortunately, it's been relegated historically to creativity through some medium. The industrialized world has separated design as its own activity and created a division of labor called plan, design, and build. So oftentimes, and some of you in, let's say, in engineering may see this paradigm evolving. I don't know, I'd be curious to, but oftentimes in the industrial world, the corporate world, we have planners that are working in silos. We have and then we pass that on to the designers, and then we pass that on to the builders, right? And everyone's working in silos, and it can create ineffectiveness that way. And so the idea here is that design thinking is an extremely powerful way of harnessing the genius of diversity in all its forms. And so the more diversity we bring to the table, the better results we're going to get. So if an idea has any value to the world, it should have an intended benefit to a group of people. And motivated by a better future, design thinking, culture, and practices are used to thoughtfully address and validate an idea over time. Some of these particular slides that I'm on now come from Adam Kalish, who did a keynote here for what's it called? The thing that the event Ken runs every year. Yeah, for Digitech. Yeah, so you'll see the reference here. Design thinking is focused on better futures through the art of the possible, and so if it's accomplished by having a clear goal or a sense of purpose. It's balancing intuition and rationality to help us avoid rigidity or ideology, and it's multidisciplinary co-intelligence that brings diversity of skills and experiences to the table. All right, so the goal is to drive collective understanding and alignment by generating key insights which drive informed and impactful solutions. It's then about capacity building for self-sufficiency. This is worth emphasizing, that part of what we're designing for is not just to come up with the effective solution that's implemented, but to build the capacity of whoever we're engaging as beneficiaries to be empowered to continue to address the problem. All right, let's look at this idea of creativity and innovation. Creativity is unleashing the potential of the mind to conceive new ideas, right? How many of you think you're fairly creative people? Good, yeah, and everyone has this capacity in them. It's just a matter of recognizing it, cultivating it. I do think that there, probably some of us have more strengths than others in that area. Now, innovation, on the other hand, is completely measurable. It's about introducing change into relatively stable systems. So by identifying an unrecognized and unmet need, an organization can use innovation to apply its creative resources to design an appropriate solution, right? Now, organizations often chase creativity when what they're really looking for is innovation. It's translating creativity into something that actually creates measurable impact on what they're trying to accomplish. So Theodore Levitt put it this way: what is often lacking is not creativity in the idea creating sense, because there are millions of ideas being produced, every second around the world, right? But innovation in the action producing sense. In other words, putting ideas to work. So, and we talked a little bit about these silos. This work promotes radical collaboration. So again, when you're forming your teams, think about that. Can you bring in, and one of the things we're trying to promote across campus, and the InnoVenture weekend is hopefully, evolves to be a really dynamic representation of this, is that we have, engineers with public health, right, and with business students and entrepreneurship students and communication and social science students and social work and education. All of those people, the computer scientists, working together around these complex problems.
If
So
you
it's,
don't know about InnoVenture weekend, it's October 12th and 13th, and it'll be in here. Sorry.
perfect, yeah, and it's a great practice for this kind of work. It really, really good. The more you do this, the more it becomes more intuitive, and you're going to get better at it. So again, we're trying to bust down these silos, challenge assumptions, challenge stereotypes, challenge biases, and address blind spots. We can't pretend these things don't exist, right? They do. It's just part of human nature. So the trick is, can we become aware of them, and can we set ourselves up to counter some of the assumptions that we bring to the table, or counter some of the biases we bring to the table. And part of the way to do that is to have diverse teams with people, diverse in all its forms, ideas, experiences, backgrounds, you name it, mindsets. And this kind of radical collaboration requires, deep trust, openness, respect, courage, and empathy. And so I'm really excited about the stakeholder meeting tomorrow night, because we just have an incredible array of leaders coming from around this community to rally around this organization that is in a deep transition right now. They've been evicted from their building, but they're deeply rooted in the community. People are distraught that they're going to lose this resource, and all of our work this semester is built on these pieces. The students already, in just 2 or 3 weeks, through immersion, through observation, through engagement and service with the group, has developed levels of all of these things. And now they're so much more bought into helping to create solutions. All right, so we're moving from creating choices to making choices, and then implementing those choices. I'm going to move ahead a little bit so we can get into make sure we cover what we need to cover today. Turning ideas into reality is often difficult, and a large percentage of organizational initiatives fail. Why? The gap between the idea of a desirable outcome and immediately achieving viability is too large. So let's talk about those things. And these are some of the factors that we use when we converge on ideas. Are they desirable? Are they viable? And are they feasible? So let's break those down a little bit. So desirability, will this solution fill a need? And again, to the degree that you understand the problem, is the degree to which you're going to more likely come up with ideas that are relevant to the needs of the people you're trying to serve. But you still need to use convergent thinking to be really intentional about making sure that it's there. And sometimes you're going to have to ask them, or observe them interacting with the prototype, making sure that it meets cultural norms. Otherwise it's not going to be adopted. All of those things, right? Will it fit into people's lives? again, this is from a lifestyle perspective, from a cultural perspective, a social perspective. Will it appeal to them? Will they actually want it? Will they actually use it? Okay, let's talk about this for a second because it's so important. So again, we've already talked about this idea that all entrepreneurs are trying to solve a problem, to create a product or service that meets the real needs of their customers, whoever they may be, whether they're paying customers or not. And we've established that this is a needs-first process, not idea-first. And studies comparing successful and unsuccessful innovation have found that the primary discriminator was the degree to which user needs were fully understood. That's how important this is. I mean, it's not just academic, right? Does anyone know, someone read this quote for us? Yeah.
If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions.
Does anyone know who said that?
Albert Einstein.
Yeah, yep, Albert Einstein. So now, granted, he's smarter than most of us, but the point is valid, though. To the degree that we understand the problem, to the degree that we fall in love with the problem, is the degree to which we're actually going to be effective. It's not sitting in some building thinking that we're super creative, brilliant people coming up with these cool ideas, right? It's going out of the building and understanding the problem, and you know, some secondary research as well, right? So what does understanding the problem mean? It's looking at all these dimensions, the social, political, economic, cultural, environmental, and personal dimensions. It's understanding the needs of the primary beneficiaries or the customers and other stakeholders in the system. And it's identifying the constraints, the synergies, the potential conflicts, and the resources available. So let's dig a little bit more into that. And again, if you're going to engage this process, this is all really critical. And some of you probably apply these principles already, but it never hurts to really make them explicit and be intentional about it. So Theodore Levitt, again, has this great quote: people don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. What does that mean? Yeah.
They're buying a potential solution to their problem.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Unless they're a collector of drills, they could care less about the drill itself. It's just a tool that's meeting a need that they have. And if someday we come out with a laser that's cheaper and better at making a hole, that's what people are going to gravitate to, right? So again, don't get stuck on your idea. Your idea is the drill. It's the problem that we need to fall in love with, right? And it's going to be an evolving process. So there's a whole literature on this idea of jobs to be done, which is synonymous with the needs of the consumer, the customer, or the beneficiary. Defines the functional and or emotional goals that people want to accomplish and problems they are trying to resolve, right? It defines the action for which a product or service may be needed. So exactly what you said. Yeah, what problem are they buying or hiring a service or product to address? And so let's just look at an example quickly. Let's say we have a new set of parents with a newborn baby, and they need to go buy a car seat. What is a functional job that they're trying to accomplish by hiring the car seat? I mean, the term that's used in this literature is hiring the car seat, even though you're buying it. What is a functional job? Yeah, so let's see if someone else wants to. I love the engagement, but let's just see. Anyone else? What functional job as a new parent am I trying to fulfill by buying the car seat?
Protect their baby.
Yeah, keeping the baby safe, right? Yeah. What emotional job might I be buying? Might I be buying the car seat for?
Feeling good about your child.
Yes, feeling like I'm a good parent, feeling like the child is safe. And if any of you, I mean, as a parent, one can attest to the fact that this is a very real need. I mean, I will spend extra money to not just keep my baby safe, but to feel that she's safe, right? And what if there were 5 car seats that were all 5-star rated, but one of them was branded Lululemon, you know? or Nike. What might I be doing, you know, and it's more expensive. What social job might I be trying to fulfill by buying that car seat? Yeah.
And that would be brand loyalty?
Well, it could be brand loyalty, and that could be a social job. I could see that as a social job, yeah, but what else might I be trying to project out there? Yeah.
Showing people you have a designer for a seat.
Yeah, so it could be impressing other people, but it also could be wanting other people to think that I'm a really good parent, right? Is that where you're, yeah. So anyone who underestimates these kind of jobs really, I suggest, might be a little naive in how powerful these are in coming up with marketing and product design and brand, you know, loyalty, things like that. People will, whether they're aware or not, these are very real needs that they're addressing when they buy a product or service, right? So you can translate this to any kind of problem you're addressing. And we'll look at another example in a second, all right? Any thoughts about this? So think about what it is, rather than, you know, coming up with, oh, I have a cool idea for a car seat. It's backwards. It's what do the beneficiaries or the customers need to accomplish? What needs do they have in their lives so that I can design something that's going to meet those needs, right? So we also want to, when we're looking at these different jobs to be done, obviously there's more than one stakeholder in any system, and so oftentimes you're going to have potential conflicts, and you're going to want to find the synergies. So let's look at an example, a third grade classroom. You know, a typical third grade classroom in the United States, let's say. What are some of the stakeholders in this example? Who are some of the members of this small little ecosystem we have? Just throw names out, or roles. Students, teachers, who else? Principal, who else? Parents, right? Okay, let's stop there. So what is a functional job of a third grade teacher?
Teaching the kids.
Yeah, okay, teaching the kids. And what about in terms of outcomes?
Looking at the outcome of teaching.
Yeah, my job isn't just to teach. It's to make sure that I'm teaching in a manner that allows you to do what as a student? Yeah, to learn, and we could keep going. Yeah, to learn. Now in Florida, you know, Florida is one of those states that has implemented this, you know, high accountability system. So we used to have the FCAT, for example, right? We have a set of standards that serve as benchmarks for determining whether a child should advance from one grade to the next. Whether you are on board with those standards or way of being accountable or not, let's put that aside for a second. Did anyone take the FCAT when they were in school? Okay. So unfortunately, part of what happens in some schools is the teacher's doing what? Teaching to the FCAT, right? And it becomes, we lose the whole concept of what education is really about, right? But okay, let's take now a third grader. What is one of the social jobs that the third grader might have?
Pay attention to class.
Pay attention in class. Okay, what else?
Have relationships with the
Yeah, make friends, have relationships. How about an emotional job that a third grader might have? Well, what do you do when you make friends, hopefully?
I'm happy.
Yeah, have fun, right? Have fun. So, can anyone see it? If I'm an innovator coming into a third grade classroom, you know, I've been called in. Like, this isn't happening. I've been called in, and can anyone see a potential conflict between a job, a social emotional job of a student wanting to have fun, and a functional job of a teacher making sure you pass the FCAT, right? Is the FCAT fun? No. So if I double down on the FCAT,
it's getting close to time to go.
Are you serious?
Till 6, I believe, right?
Oh, I thought we had it for longer than that.
There's a networking event that reserved the room after 6. So.
Oh, wow, okay. Ken reserved the room for us, but sorry,
Are you sure about that?
I'll double check.
Okay.
100% sure, but.
Yeah, and maybe text Ken real quickly, just to make sure, and we're happy to wrap it up if we need to, but it just seemed like it would be a pretty big conflict, or oversight. Okay, so does anyone see that, that there's a potential conflict there? If I come in as an innovator and double down on teaching to the FCAT, that the kids might sabotage my innovation? Okay, if I just double down on kids having fun, that the teacher might sabotage the innovation, right? So I need to uncover these potential conflicts between the needs of the stakeholders and find synergy. What synergy might exist there? Can learning be fun? Yes, thank goodness, yeah. It can be really fun. And so how about my innovation understanding that synergy and the conflict, leverage that understanding, that awareness, right? That insight. So you're always trying to uncover insights as you go through this work. All right, so we're going to need to make a decision here based on what comes back. I'll just keep going for a minute.
yeah, I can go see if there's somewhere else we can go, or I'm texting Ken now.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll do, if they need this room right now, we'll just move. If there's another space, it doesn't matter. But I do want to get to, if we had time, the rest of it. So let's look at feasibility. Is the technology needed to power the design solution available or within reach? At the very least, actually, we're almost done with the slides. We can just move out to a space out there and just do the hands-on piece. Yeah. Maybe you can mention that to him, Wendy.
So okay, Caitlin, you'll need to pack up the stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe just mention that we just need 5 more minutes, and then everyone will be happy, right? Synergies, right? So, feasibility. Is the technology needed to power the design solution available or within reach? Sometimes the goal is to create a new technology, but sometimes we need to work with what we've got, right? So determine what your goal is on this front early on. How long will this take? Is it realistic, right? And can the organization actually make it happen? So we're determining whether we have the resources in the long run to make this work, right? And then viability, is it aligned with our long-term goals as an organization? Is it cost effective? And is it sustainable? Are we going to get a return on our investment, or are we going to be able to continue implementing this innovation, right? So we need to look at those 3 things, and that intersection is that place we want to be.
No, you don't need to pack up, Caitlin.
No? Okay.
They're going in the pitch room.
So are you sure? Are they sure?
Yeah, they said they were fine with that. So.
Okay.
We just want to keep Caitlin's
So let's look at this idea of framing the problem a second, and how important it is to frame the problem in a way that opens up possibilities for us. How many of you feel that parking on campus is a big issue, right? Okay. So what might be? Well, let's look at this. This is it's not very accurate. I just pulled it really quickly. Let's say and this is a little old now, but let's say there's 5,500 academic staff, 6,200 administrative staff. So, almost 12,000 there. It's probably more now. We have over 40,000 students. And then if we look at, oh, I'm sorry, I missed the data on the parking spots. Let's say we have, over 50,000 people that need parking spots, not necessarily at the same time, but overall. And let's say there were 10,000 parking spots available. I did the quick numbers. I don't remember what there is, but there's definitely not an alignment. It may be a lot less than that. How might we frame this problem? Oh, yeah, so how might we frame the problem? How would you describe this problem? And let's say when we frame our problem, we want to start with, you know, how can we, or how might we, da-da-da-da-da, right? So what is the basic problem here in your minds? Not enough parking spaces. Well, if that's our deepest understanding of the problem, right? How might we frame the problem as a design challenge? That it starts with how might we, you know? How might we create more parking spaces? Yeah. So let's run with that for a second. I mean that might be a typical way of framing this problem. How can we increase parking spaces for students, or how might we build more parking spaces on campus, right? Now, here's another great Einstein quote. Someone read it, please.
No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it.
Okay. Are we ever going to be able to build enough parking spaces? No. We can play that game till kingdom come. It's not going to happen. We're doing that with roads right now, right? Has anyone been out to LA and seen, you know, 10 flyovers, one on top of the other? How high are we going to go eventually? 20, 30, 40? You know what I mean? So, someone read this one.
Never change things by fighting the existing reality. Change something, build a new model that makes the existing model look obsolete.
Okay, so if we take this to heart, how might we reframe the problem?
How can we better utilize our space and fit more parking spots on campus?
Okay, that's a step in the right direction, but we're still sort of fixated on this idea of parking. What is the purpose of the university?
To go to class.
Oh, no, even broader than that. Why do you go to class in the first place?
For education.
Yeah. And so the way I might frame that is the purpose of the university is to provide, you know, the resources that students need to learn to their full potential, to realize their full potentials, to be professionally prepared for meaningful work. Yeah. What's that? Well, before we get there, this isn't yet coming up with ideas, it's framing. The framing is critical. So if the purpose of the university is to provide the resources, access to resources for students to realize their full potential, do you need to park a car in order to do that? Okay, so how might we frame this in a way that opens up more possibilities? Wait, say it again.
How do we provide more resources for students to get to campus?
So it's not necessarily providing more resources. Oh yeah, okay, more resources around them accessing those resources. Yeah, so how might we provide more resources for students to access the resources of the university? Yeah, something along those lines. And here's another way. How might we increase access for students to campus resources? It's basically what you said. Now, can you see how different this framing is? What are some ideas? Now let's move into ideation. How might we do this? How might we increase access to the resources of the university? Just come on, quickly.
Online classes. More online classes.
Online classes. What else? And we're not saying online classes are good or bad. We're just ideating, right? Yeah. I don't know of many people who want to go strictly to online, but it could play a very important role in what we're trying to accomplish.
You could build off-campus resources and provide an incentive to go there.
Yeah, provide incentives somehow. What else? We could have satellite campuses. You know, we could leverage community partnerships. What else? Biking, more walkability. You see how the list goes? I mean, you could ideate all day long around this, and it doesn't involve. Now, parking could be part of the formula too. It doesn't mean that parking is wrong. It's just that, does anyone really think we're going to build our way out of insufficient parking? It's just a fool's errand, you know, right? So, too many times we're completely constricting our ideation process by how we frame the problem. How can we build more parking spaces? Is embedding the solution this idea that we think we know so well into the problem statement. And so it's just a circular loop, right? Do you see that? Instead of opening up. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me show you this website quickly. And we're gonna, so IDEO has been one of the pioneers in the field of human-centered design, particularly around social innovation more recently. But they've been involved in, the founders of IDEO have been involved in design work of many types for years. But look at, this Open IDEO is a framework that leverages the idea of open sourcing. In this case, it's using open source to engage the human-centered design process around these challenges that they put out globally, right? So teams around the world work on these. So let's look at some past challenges. Let's read these quickly because we want to make sure we get to these. Wait, where'd it go? Yeah, so someone read the first one, this one.
How might we get products to people without generating plastic waste?
Okay, it's a powerful design challenge, right? You see, instead of, well, first of all, oftentimes a lot of people's reaction is, you know, why is there so much plastic waste? There shouldn't be so much plastic waste. Well, who's going to do it if not us, right? Someone's got to do it. And the way we open up possibilities is by framing it in a way that allows possibilities to emerge, right? How about this one? Someone?
How might we reduce stigmas and increase opportunities for people with disabilities?
Okay, and this one?
How might we reimagine the end-of-life experience for ourselves and loved ones?
Okay, so interesting ideas emerge out of these challenges. It's just fascinating. But what I want you to do is take just a couple of minutes right now. How many of you know what problem you want to focus on? Does anyone? Anyone else? Okay, those of you who don't, just pick a problem right now and just practice framing the problem. Okay, and so let's take a couple minutes to frame our problem in this way. I want everyone to start with how might we, right? How might we, da 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 da. Okay, just do that now. What do you guys think you're going to focus on? No idea, or do you have some ideas? Yeah.
Basically, how to get into class quicker within campus.
Okay, so what's the problem?
Campus is really big, so sometimes the walks take like 20 minutes.
And people are late. Okay. So how might we? What is the design challenge? How might we?
Introduce methods for people to get to class faster?
Yeah, something along those lines. So yeah, keep working. Work on an idea so this is actually productive time for you. Because then, yeah.
Should it be like very broad or even concise?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is such a thing as too broad and too narrow. You're either going to constrict your possibilities or it's just overwhelming. But within those two extremes, there's some variance where you have to decide where you want to fall. And so I can't think of an example off the top of my head. But when we listen to people's, we can sort of help determine whether they might be too big or too small, or that they've chosen to fall within a reasonable part of that spectrum, you know, or an effective part of that spectrum.
Are you looking for the networking event?
Okay, does anyone have something they want to share? Just take a stab at it. I mean, we're all in this Yeah, so what might be another way of framing that?
Like increase, sports.
No, now you're coming up with ideas. We just want to frame it. So how might we, so you could flip it from, and I'm not saying that's wrong, that's a good design challenge, but how, you could flip it from the negative to the positive. So instead of decreasing medicinal usage, how about, what might be another way of framing it? How might we increase the ways that people experiencing, what was it? Learning disabilities can engage or can learn effectively or whatever, right? And so, for me, there's something in the mind that second version of it, I don't know, it just allows, for me personally, it may be different for you, but instead of the negative sort of boxes me in on this idea of the drugs and medicine, whereas the other way helps me to think more divergently, right? Think about that. Yeah. What else? Yeah, just throwing out. Yeah, you guys did. Anyone else? Yeah. How about you? I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Tom.
Yeah, Tom. Yeah, thanks.
Well, how about for me, my group we're working on wristbands. So maybe how might we, create synergetic relationships for blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature.
Okay, so you're sort of going backwards. You have an idea in mind, right?
Okay.
But that's okay. Yeah, that's okay, as long as you keep an open mind. So yeah, go back and pretend you didn't have this idea. What would be the design challenge? How might we produce wearable technology that helps us monitor or maybe uncover, what's the word, things like, am I going in the right direction? Yeah. And then it might not end up being a wristband. It could be something else that's wearable, right? Do you see how that opens up? Now, this is an example of the too broad, too narrow idea. I think you're embedding the wrist. If you say, how might we produce a wristband that does this and this, it still opens up some good ideation. But you might be cutting yourself short of some other idea that's even more powerful. The wristbands will come out in the ideation process. If it's good enough, it's going to stay on your list when you converge. But why shut down other ideas? It's wearable that you want because it meets the need of your customers, that they need something that in their lives, one of their jobs is to be efficient, to be able to run out the door in the morning, to not have to carry around some heavy thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That it's simple, it's cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what emerges out of your understanding of all those needs, and the problem is that it should be a wearable device, and then you go from there, right? I mean, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying think about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Should diverge a little bit more before converging?
I would suggest that. Yeah. And don't start with the wristband. Start with what it is you're trying to. What need are you trying to meet? And then I think you'll have a more robust ideation process. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's keep moving then. So again, without a good question, a good answer has no place to go. We're gonna. I want to move to this last activity real quickly. It's just going to take 5 minutes or so, and it moves into the ideating, prototyping phase of design thinking or human-centered design, and then producing something that you can go test and validate. And so, what is the value of prototyping?
It allows you to lay out all your ideas and pretty much map out what you're thinking on paper, so you can visually look at it.
Yeah, and not just necessarily on paper. It could be a model on paper, it could be a diagram, but what else could a prototype look like?
Working model.
Yeah, it could be a physical working model. It could be an interactive, just a basic website. It could be a lot of things. But what is the value of prototyping in addition to helping to, for your ideas to coalesce into something tangible? Remember that it's not about us. It's about the customers or the beneficiaries.
Like if you made a smaller unit operation, you could save yourself a lot of money before you constructed the whole.
Yeah, so one of the values is being able to test an idea in a low-risk, rapid manner. So we get feedback more quickly because it's quick and it's cheap, and we don't have the high risk of investing a lot of money into building what we think is the perfect solution, only to find out that it's not there yet. But what else? What's beneficial for the customer, for the beneficiary? Think about it. A picture tells 1,000 words, right? From their perspective, what's valuable about a prototype?
It's been tested before.
What?
I was just going to say it's been tested before, so they have.
No, well, let's say they're the ones testing it. They're the ones, you're giving them a prototype for feedback, What's the value from their perspective versus sitting up here and talking for an hour? Yeah.
Unbiased feedback?
Yeah, it helps generate that kind of feedback, but it allows them to interact with your idea in a more tangible manner. And so it brings out emotions, usability, in ways that just talking about it doesn't bring out, right? You get such better feedback by presenting your idea in a tangible form, whether it's virtual or physical, and then allowing them to react to it and interact with it. Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to do right now. Let me pull out. What I'm going to do is get into groups of 3, please. All right. And we're just going to do a quick activity just to get the creative juices going, and then we're going to wrap up. Okay.